we're going to go ahead and sign into Appulate. This is just appulate.com/sign in. Now, if you have never used Appulate before, there is still a very high possibility and chance that you have an Appulate account. You may just not know your password. So go ahead and type in your email address here in this top section and click Forgot Password if you do not know your password. If the system lets you reset your password, your agency does in fact have an Appulate account. If it does not allow you to reset your password, then you can go back to appulate.com/sign in and hit the sign up now button and create a new account. But I highly recommend trying to reset your password first, because the chances are that you do actually have an Appulate account. So we're going to go ahead and click this big blue sign in button. This will then take us to our Appulate dashboard. So I do run out of a training account, so I have a bunch of training insureds in here, but this is what your dashboard is going to look like once you start to get insureds built up into your system. When you first log into Appulate, this might not have any insureds, which is fine. Really just means that you probably haven't used the system a lot. But as you start entering submissions into Appulate, your dashboard will start to look, just like this. Now, there are two ways to get submission information into Appulate. One would, of course, be manually, meaning you're not trying to bridge over information from your completed ACORD forms into Appulate. So those agencies who do not use ACORD forms may still use Appulate. Those agencies who do use ACORD forms can still use Appulate. So it really is for everyone. Now, if you'd like to start directly in the Appulate system, all you would do is click this Add New Customer or Prospect button, this blue button, and fill out the screen manually. It really is the only different screen in the workflow from those who use ACORD forms and those who don't. All right, now for those agencies who do use ACORD forms, let's talk about where to find Appulate Uplink. Now, Uplink is a simple print driver that's going to allow you as the agent to bridge over information from your ACORD forms into the Appulate system, eliminating the need to rekey any unnecessary data and supercharging your submission process. Now, to locate Appulate Uplink, there's a bunch of these tabs up here at the top. The one that you will be looking for is the one that says Tools. It is the second icon in from the far right-hand side. It's going to give you a drop-down menu. Please choose the third option down. It's listed as Appulate Uplink. Go ahead and click Uplink. Now, if you are an Outlook email user, please close your Outlook prior to clicking the download button. If you're not, don't worry about it. But if you do use Outlook, please close Outlook before you click the download button. Once you've done that, you've closed your Outlook, please click the big blue Download Uplink driver button. You will run the setup wizard, and it takes about a minute to install. Once installed, Appulate Uplink will show up in your list of printer drivers. It will also be a shortcut when you right-click on PDF forms on your desktop. You will see both here in just a little bit when we take a look at workflow. Now, once you have downloaded Uplink, you'll want to take a look at your markets. So if no one has done this in your office yet, you're not really sure what your markets look like in Appulate, let's take a peek at those. Now, I always recommend taking a look at your selected markets first. So you go to Markets, it's really that middle icon at the top, choose Selected from the drop-down menu. And this will give you a list of markets that have already been added to your agency's profile, either by somebody maybe in the past who has used Appulate in your office. They could also be added by markets that you already work with. There are markets that can add your particular agency as an Appulate agency because they themselves also use Appulate. Now, once you have taken inventory of all of the markets in your selected market list, and you've identified what markets may still need to be added, you will go back to markets and click on Available. The available list is quite long. It is alphabetical. However, with that said, I highly encourage using the search function up near the top where it says Name under Available Markets. Type in the name of the markets that you're looking for. It's going to be much faster to go through those markets. Now, I will say a question that I got last time for our previous webinars, what about the state? A lot of agents seem to get hung up on the state column. The state column is simply here to tell you where that market is located. It does not mean that that market only quotes in that state. It's simply where they're located. So don't get hung up on the state selections here. Now, what we want to do at this point is move a market over from available to selected. So by doing that action, by moving a market over from available to selected, it's going to allow my agency to show, or it's going to allow my agents, when I go to quote, to choose, a particular market that we as an agency already have an appointment with or might be open brokerage. If a market is not in your selected market list, then it won't show up when you process your submission. So we're going to use just this test market up at the top to move over. On the far right-hand side of the screen, there is a select column. It's got a bunch of plus signs next to it. You're going to hover over the market that you'd like to move over. So we're going to click the plus sign. And what that's going to do is then move that market over from available to selected. So if I head to my selected market list now, here is that test agency that I added. So now that that test agency has been added, I would see that market show up in my market list when I go to actually work on a submission. Very similarly, I also want to show you how to remove a market. Maybe you look at your selected market list and there are markets that you as an agency no longer have appointments with, or you might not work with anymore. To remove a market, a very similar action, you're going to head to the far right-hand side of the screen and hit the minus sign. It's then going to move that market over from selected to available. You never delete markets. All it's doing is moving those markets back and forth. Now, just to be clear, Appulate does not provide appointments. We do not step in the middle of any required appointment processes, nor are we a part of any commissions conversation. So if you have any questions regarding appointments or commissions, please contact your markets directly. With that said, this appointment column right here, kind of near the right-hand side of the screen, just kind of ignore it. This section will be changing. It's not currently applicable. It's a portion of the platform that's going to be changed in the future. So don't spend time in this appointments list. I will, however, though, talk about add to RFQ. You can see if I hover over that verbiage, it tells me exactly what add to RFQ is. Now, we had this particular feature before, and then we got rid of it for a little while, but we had a bunch of agencies who wanted it back. So we brought it back for it to be optional. So what add to RFQ means is add to request for quote. So if I want a particular market to show up every single time I'm quoting a certain line of business, I would select that market just by clicking the checkbox. Now, every single time I quoted a line of business that's accepted by Accident Fund would show up automatically in my selected market list. If I wanted to remove a market, similar action, just hit that checkbox again and it will be removed. We have some agents who really love that feature and some agents who don't use it at all. It's entirely optional. I use the example of a lot of California agents will go to State Fund for workers' comp. So they want State Fund to come up every single time they quote work comp. So if that's the case for you for a particular market, you would just make sure that that add to RFQ box is selected. Now, after you have added all of the markets to your selected market list, there is one final, very crucial piece of setup that does need to be completed. And that is entering credential information for those markets that require it. To do so, go ahead and click on your name at the top right-hand side of the screen. We're then going to scroll down to the section indicated Market Login. Enter your credential information for those markets that require it. Or if it's a submission process that's going to happen entirely with an Appulate, you may only need to apply your producer code or input your producer code rather. So please make sure that credential information is entered for all markets that are requiring it here. One more time, you'll click to get to this section, you'll click on your name, top right-hand side of the screen, and scroll down to the section indicated market logins and complete this section. Now that is the final piece of setup. I'm actually going to get into reports here in this section before we get into workflow, just because this particular account that I'm in is going to be able to provide us with a little bit more detail on reports rather than the account that I use to demonstrate workflow. So let's talk about reports. Appulate has extensive reporting features. Now, this is very helpful when communicating with your markets and your market representatives. Market reps will come into agencies with their own reports asking, why didn't you submit to this, or why didn't you maybe bind this? And a lot of times, of course, it has to do with, premium or coverages. So underneath our report section, we have quite a few reports that you can take a look at. Book of business is a really great one, as well as statistics. So let's take a look at book of business. Book of business is going to look at all of the entire book for your particular agency. It's going to show you how many active policies are available for any locations underneath your agency's umbrella, whether you're a single location agency or a multiple location agency. It will total the entire premium amount as well as any commission if it's logged with an Appulate. Some markets do not log commission with an Appulate, so you may not see this. You can also expand these to break them down by user. So you can see who the most active users, who the most active people who are quoting and binding business are within particular market locations. You also have the ability to market any of them down, or narrow any of them down rather. So if you wanted to look at producers or CSRs specifically, you can do that too. This is all exportable to Excel. So if you'd like to create a physical report to share with folks in your office or whoever, you can definitely do that. Now, let's take a look at statistics here. This is another part of our reporting feature. So this will take a look at, how many hours are spent quoting and what the bound ratio is within the system. So this will give you a detailed description of how much time folks are spending with an Appulate and what the percentage is on accounts that they have bound. Lastly, let's talk about request for quote here. So we'll go back to quotes or reports rather and click on request for quote. I'm going to expand our main office here. It's going to break it down by user. You can see how many new accounts were created, how many accounts are currently being worked on, how many accounts maybe are in pending status, quoted, ones that are declined by market, maybe are declined by insured, also total bound accounts, and then it also includes the premium. So this is a really great way to take a look at how your book of business is doing, what the health of your book of business is, where your agents, producers, CSRs are spending time, where you as a producer or a CSR are spending your time. Great way to take a look at, what's an Appulate. All right, now that we've gone through reports, I do want to get into Producer Connect Standard workflow. So I'm going to hop out of this particular view for now. Here's my Accord form that I am going to be using today. This is simply an Accord 130, nothing else attached to it. I'm going to open it up here. This is a native Accord that I'm using as my example, but you can also have an Accord open in your agency management system. Just to reiterate here, the uplink feature, the print driver that we at this point have already downloaded, is complementary to any agency management system. Doesn't matter what agency management system you're on, you will be able to use uplink. And what I want you to take from this training today is not so much the line of business that I'm working on, it is the workflow. So it's how I'm getting the information into Appulate, how I am answering the questions, and how I am obtaining my quotes. So if you are in a state or you're in an office where you do not do workers' compensation, please feel free to replace this line of business in your head as you go along with us today. If business auto is something you're more familiar with, or GL, whatever it is, just pretend that that's what we're working on. That is because the workflow in Appulate is identical regardless of the line of business. The workflow is not going to change. And I know that can be difficult for some agents to fully understand because, you know, the different carriers sometimes have different workflows for different lines of business, which can be really cumbersome. And that is just not the deal with Appulate. So let's go ahead and get this information from my Accord 130 to the Appulate system. There are two ways to use the uplink feature at this point. We're going to go ahead and first select print, whether it's in your agency management system or the native Accord environment like I am using. Make sure that your destination printer is Appulate Uplink. I'm going to go ahead and expand this for a second just to show you that I have multiple printer destinations here. A lot of folks' systems will probably default to whatever your default printer is. Just make sure to change this to Appulate Uplink before you click print. Once you select Appulate Uplink, you would go ahead and click print. Once you did that, it would give you a pop-up in the middle of the screen asking you to validate your Appulate credentials. Now that is one way to use Uplink. There is also a very nice shortcut that a lot of agents love that I like to show. Here's that Accord form that I had opened. All I have to do to get this into Appulate is right-click that Accord form, and Appulate Uplink shows up as a shortcut. So we'll click the Uplink tool, and the exact same thing happens. Appulate is just asking us to validate our Appulate credentials. Now we will go ahead and hit send. It's opening up the Appulate system. It's going to have us confirm the line of business that we're working on, and there's a reason to this. Because the current Accord that I uplinked into the system could possibly be applicable to other lines of business. This is a drop-down menu that when I select it, shows me the other lines of business that are applicable to an Accord 130. So if I'd rather change this to a different line of business, I have the power to do so. With that said, I also use the example of if I uplinked an Accord 125, this list would be much longer because, you know, the 125 is virtually applicable to every line of business and insurance. So this will change depending upon the Accord number that you uplink. So let's select work comp and click continue. This is going to take us to our SMART questionnaire section of our submission. So this is where all of the main underwriting questions or missing and required questions for markets will show up. All of the duplicate information from my Accord form has been bridged over into the Appulate system at this point. So let's go ahead and add the two markets that we're going to focus on. When I add these two markets, their supplemental applications will populate, and then I'll head over to the forms section and talk about forms for a second. So the first market I'm going to add, I'm going to click this little plus sign here that says add market. The first market I'm going to add is Westlake, GA. For the purposes of the training today, Westlake GA does represent an MGA, but we do have both MGAs and carrier directs that are what we call an Appulate style submission. And you know something is an Appulate style submission because of the Appulate clover that is accompanying that particular market's name. So an Appulate style submission means that that market's entire rate quote bind process is going to happen with an Appulate. I'm not going to leave the Appulate system at all to rate, quote, or bind with this market. Now, you know, for the purpose of the training, like I said, Westlake GA is an MGA. You can see they've given us a list of markets. Now, this list of markets is the list of submarkets that this particular MGA can approach on our behalf. It gives me the power to select and then deselect the markets as I choose. I'm only going to focus on one today. So I'll just go ahead and select Encino. You can see that my form section has changed here. I now have 3 forms that show up, and that's because supplementals have been added for Encino and Westlake GA. I'm going to minimize my Appulate style submission for a second. I'm going to add my second market here. Arrowhead is going to represent my second market. This is an e-submission style market, and e-submission style markets are still partners of Appulate, just like Appulate style submission markets are. The difference is with e-submission style markets, they have a carrier portal that they want to continue using, and that is absolutely fine. What Appulate is going to do is supercharge your submission process by bridging over all of the duplicate data from the Appulate system to the carrier portal, so you don't have to rekey any information that's duplicate. Before we continue to workflow, I do want to head over to the form section for a second and talk about supplementals. It is a question I get a lot. Now, I do want to say at this point, Producer Connect standard agencies do not have access to Accord forms. So if you are a Producer Connect standard agency, you will not see the ability to add additional Accord forms to your submission. It will only be supplementals. But if that's fine with you, great. A lot of folks just need the system for supplementals. Now, I have two supplementals that have shown up here based off of the markets that I select. So please remember and keep in mind that supplementals will not populate until you have added your market. So if you are looking for a particular supplemental, add your market first. I'm going to go ahead and click on this Westlake GA supplemental application just to show you that it has at this point been completed with the information that I've had from my Accord form so far. Now, keep in mind, it does have missing and required questions that are in the Appulate Smart Questionnaire section that we'll answer here in a bit. But you can see, I mean, I don't have to rekey any of this. It's already done for me. If you needed to edit a supplemental application for any reason on the view of the form that you as an agent may be used to looking at, there is an edit feature. So under Forms, this middle icon that is a plain piece of paper with a pencil, you would go ahead and click on that. It's going to default to a Q&A version of that form, just a question and answer view, but it's no different than what's in inline, but some folks prefer inline, and that's fine. So instead of Q&A, which is what we're currently on, go ahead and click inline, and you can edit any section with a pencil, which is, of course, the entire form. Now we'll go back to the Smart Questionnaire section and begin working on our submission. We're going to start with the Appulate style submission first. I'm going to expand my submarket list here just to take a look at it, add it as a visual here. We're going to move our view over now to the middle of the screen. I am currently getting on my letter indicator a red D for decline. Now, if this was a true declination, then you as the agent can stop right then and there, because why are you going to try to submit something you're already blocked on? In this instance, hovering over that indicator, it gives me a yellow informational telling me that my declination reason is because this FEIN has already been reserved by another agent. In this instance, it's just because I do these trainings all day long, so I need to give the system an FEIN that it will accept. What I want you to take from hovering over this letter indicator is the fact that these links here are live and dynamic. So if I click on this FEIN link, it takes me directly to the section that I need to address and highlights it in a big red box. So it takes the guesswork out of trying to figure out where questions are that need to be answered. Now my red D for decline has changed to an orange A for accepted, which means this submission looks like it's going to be good to go, but we need to provide the system with some missing and required information for our submission before we can move forward. Now, you may choose to continue using the live and dynamic links workflow. That is completely fine. I love that workflow, but I know that we have some agents who may prefer a slightly different view, and that's fine too. That secondary view is the use of the tabs down here at the bottom. So this is just saying in the subject section here, there is one missing and required question that must be addressed before you can move forward. You would scroll through the section, find the question with the indicator, and go ahead and answer it. You know, you can see here that it's the experience rating question. If I hovered over my letter indicator, it's still the experience rating question. So there is no right or wrong way to answer the questions with an Appulate. It simply comes down to what view do you prefer? So I'm going to continue answering the questions, but I'm going to use the live and dynamic links because I like it this way. I can see that I have another question here, so I'll just simply click next to that question. We'll move on to employees here, answering the questions with those indicators. I have one more here for me. You can see this is my last missing and required question. Now we have answered all of our missing and required questions. And you know that because if you hover over your letter indicator, there aren't any more missing and required questions in this section. But I do have one more thing that I need to do in order for this market to consider my risk. And that is upload my loss runs. So to do so, we will head to the loss runs tab on the far left-hand side of the screen. Now, because I had previous insurer history on my Accord form, my previous insurer, Agora West, populates here in this section. If you do not have previous insurer history on your Accord form, no problem. You can click Edit Insurance History and edit this information manually. I'm going to move my webinar control up just a little bit. Sorry about that, so I can show my upload icon. Now, to upload loss runs to a submission, there is a little clip button, this upload file button, on the far right-hand side of the screen. We'll click Upload File, and then you can choose from a file on your desktop. Choose my loss runs. You can see that I was the user that uploaded them, and they are time-stamped. Now we've gotten exactly what we were looking for. That is that green A for accepted and the green submit button. Because we have that green A for accepted and the green submit button and our little lightning bolt icon here, this market is going to be able to provide us an instant bindable quote. I will say that if the lightning bolt was not present, this would have to be referred to underwriting, and your underwriter will be the one providing you as the agent with a quote. In this instance, let's get that instant bindable quote. We'll go ahead and click submit, and in just a second, we're going to get an instant bindable quote from our market. Here is our quote proposal. We'll go ahead and click on that. It is a PDF view, so I'll go ahead and open that up. Here's our instant bindable quote. It really is that simple and easy in the Appulate system and quick to do. Now, this particular quote has a binding subjective attached to it. And I know that because my request to bind button is orange. And if I hover over that request to bind button, it tells me that that binding subjective is assigned Accord 130. So if we need to send a binding subjective, especially if it's a signature, over to an insured for signature, you can do so directly with an Appulate. On the right-hand side of that request to bind button are 3 little dots. Click those dots. All you would do here is click Send to Sign and choose your applicant from the drop-down menu or hit Add New. The applicants from the drop-down menu are generated by first, last names, and email addresses that are on your Accord form for that list. If you don't have anybody on there, this section will just be blank and you'll have to add a new applicant. What happens after you select an applicant and click OK is it sends your insured over an email directly from you asking your insured for a digital signature. They can open it up on their phone, tablet, computer, whatever's most convenient for them. They sign it right then and there on their device. And as soon as they sign it, they'll click a big blue complete button so they can't miss. And that signature is automatically loaded back into Appulate. You are notified as the agent via email that your insured provided that digital signature. So you can hop back into the system and finish your binding process by clicking that request to bind button. So that's an Appulate style submission. I want to talk about an e-submission now. So remember, e-submission markets are markets that are still partners of Appulate, but we're going to complete the submission in a carrier portal. So to bridge this over, we'll go ahead and click Submit. It's then going to allow us to click Complete Submission, which will then open up that carrier portal. Please note that it's already logged you in, it's already created the insured profile, and it's already bridged over all duplicate information from the Appulate system to the carrier portal. There may be some questions that are market specific, so therefore not duplicate in Appulate. But you may need to go through, hit a couple of radio buttons here. You would then click through your screens and obtain your quote as you're used to obtaining it. The difference is Appulate is going to autofill duplicate information that it has. So once you have obtained your quote from your market outside of Appulate, go ahead and bring it back into the Appulate system by clicking Upload Quote, choose from a file on your desktop, and it will change your status to quote prepared. Now, if you bind a quote outside of Appulate, you will want to come back into the Appulate system so that Appulate knows that this is an active policy and not a submission. Currently, this is in submission status. So if I was to bind this quote with Arrowhead in Arrowhead's portal, I'll come back into Appulate and mark it as bound within the Appulate system. It will confirm that this is going to mark this as bound and then change it to an active policy rather than a submission, so that upon renewal next year, the Appulate system will bridge over all of the duplicate data from the previous term to the new term, and you only have to, complete maybe a handful of missing and required questions. Now that is the entire workflow in Appulate from start to finish, including on, marking something as bound or binding something within Appulate.